In this next series of videos, I'm going to go over setting type in Illustrator. One thing to note right off the bat is I'll use the word text and type reversibly or synonymously in these videos. Definitely open up your own Illustrator file as you watch these videos and occasionally pause them and try the things that I'm doing out. There's no other way to learn. If you just sit and watch the videos, think you're going to absorb all of it, chances are that you will not. Right now, I'm using 2021 Illustrator. Text doesn't change much in Illustrator, so even if you're using a much newer version, shouldn't be that big of a problem. If your, let's say your area that you're working in is all messed up, looks different than mine, I always like to suggest going up here and setting to Essentials, and then going and clicking this item one more time and going to Reset Essentials. So we should hopefully be seeing the same stuff, which is much improved in the last couple versions of Illustrator. Typically we'll want to see properties over here, and then of course you have your tools over here. The properties panel has gotten so much better where we can access just about any panel from it. But if ever I am using a panel over here and you just simply cannot find it or don't see it, you can always get at any individual panel by using the Windows selection option from the main menu up at the top. So let's say I'm using the character panel and you can't find it. You just go up to Window, go down to, in fact this is one of the more complicated ones. You actually have to go to Type first, and then you'll find Character, and then you would have the character panel opened up. But as you'll see, most of the time if you're using text, you're automatically going to have the character panel show up inside of properties, and then if you want to get the look that we just had, you click on these three dots here, and then you get to see everything that's available inside of the character panel. There's two basic ways of setting text in Illustrator. You have what's called point text. This is an example of point text. Most noticeable thing about it is there's usually a point there, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. Area text is contained inside of an area. So let's start with point text and delve into that a little bit. I'm going to grab my artboard tool over here from the left and just drag out a new artboard, so I've got a nice clean area here to set some text. And I'll go over here and grab the type tool, and if I hold down the type tool, I can see that there's multiple options in here, and there's even more options. Let's see here. Well, I think to see the full amount of options, you actually have to go to Essentials Classics, but it doesn't matter because we can do everything that we want to do really with just this first tool. So that's the one you want to make sure that you have. Is just a basic text tool. And point text is done by clicking. So don't click and drag, just simply click and then type out the text that you want to type. So I'll just type out point text, and let's say for example yours showed up a lot smaller than mine. What you can do is select all of it, and I'm just taking the mouse and swiping across, and then in the properties panel you should see the font that's being used and the size. So if you want to change the size of the font, you can do it by using this little drop down right here, for example. Now I'm going to, you'll see me take the direct selection tool and click away and click on often on here just to see what's going on. I'm going to take the magnifying glass and zoom in just a little bit here. So what I want you to see is that point text, there's a little tiny point right there, and what will make this a little more obvious how that point works is I'll select this, and I'll go over here and I'll change the paragraph options right under the character options to assign or align center. And you see it jumped over. Why did it jump over? Well, because we had the type established when I first clicked on it as left justified, and the point was right there. If I click on Right Justified, you'll see it'll jump over even further. So let me just bring this into focus again. Click on Center, and you'll see it centers on that point. Click on Left, and it goes left on the point. So some of the key things about point text. It's probably most appropriate for things like posters, where you might have text that's just disjointed from other text, like the title, what the poster is about, and then maybe way down in the bottom you have a phone number and a website address and things like that. We'll talk more about that later. Another thing about point text is if you just start typing away with point text, it keeps going on and on forever in a straight line. So you actually have to hit the return key, which I'll do right now, to wrap around another line of text. And you can't just simply resize the box that the text is in and get it to reflow. What you actually do is end up destroying the integrity of the text by squishing it. Get rid of that evidence. I'll show more on resizing both types of text in a bit here, but let's move on and talk about the key features of area text. Area text, if I click on it and select it, you can see is all confined inside of an area, and if I change the size of that area, the text reflows without changing the size of the text that's in it. When in doubt, I would say use area text, even if you have different sizes, even different styles within the area, and more on that later. If we want to change something about the text that is inside of area text, we just need to select it. And there's one nice thing about that. Instead of having to go to the text tool and select, which you certainly can, in fact, I'll just show you real quick, grab the text tool, and I can do like a swipe across and select that area, swipe across, select this area, maybe just select one letter. But also, I can get there quicker. A lot of times, we use the selection tool in Illustrator, maybe because we're moving stuff around and resizing it. If we click inside of here, it's usually like a double click is what it takes. So that was 2 clicks. I now have the text tool, and I can now swipe across. And once I have the text tool activated, there's different amounts of number of times that you click on it as to what it will do. So if I move over to this new area and I double click, it selects the entire word. If I move over into this paragraph, and I think that was a, let's try a double click, yeah, word, triple click. Come on, don't make a liar out of me. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so it's either a triple click or a quadruple click selects the whole paragraph, but you'll get the feel for it once you start doing it. But once you have something selected, then you can make your change. So you could change the size, you could change the color, and so on. So point text, you can do some of the similar things. You can start out with the selection tool. And if you go over here and you do your double click, you get it in there. So a lot of that's very similar. But the big thing is when you change size, you really probably want to do it the same way you do for area text, which is just make the selection of what you want to change the size. But you can also do it by just selecting, putting the cursor up to the top and moving it. But the problem is, like I mentioned earlier, you can destroy the text very easily. So what you want to do is, if you are going to change it like that, grab one of these corner points, hold down the Shift key, resize, release the mouse, then release the Shift key. That's very important, because what happens sometimes is we'll, at the last minute, we'll release the Shift key before the mouse, and we don't realize that we messed up our text. And that's really bad when you're new, because you might not notice it. Your eye typically doesn't get real strong to squish text and the ugliness of it. until you've been doing this for a while. So I'm going to show you something very important that you want to remember here is how can I tell if I accidentally squished my text? So it's inside of the character panel, but you need to see the entire character panel to know. So I'm going to first select this, then I'm going to go over to the character panel inside of the properties panel, or I should say the character section of the properties panel. I'm going to click on these three dots here to expand it out more, and then I have these two options here, which is vertical scale, horizontal scale. These should always be set to 100%. So I'm going to repeat that again. You never want to say, oh, I want this text to fit across the top of this page, but I only have this much room, so I'm just going to stretch it out. No, that destroys your whole design because you've destroyed the text. A couple things I should point out. It's not always obvious which one you have. Is this? So one of these is area text and one is point text. Can you tell which one is which? Well, if you're looking real close, you can see the point here. And, you know, of course, Command Z is your friend. You can always just quickly make a little adjustment like that and see, okay, yeah, that reshuffled, so that must be the area text, whereas if I did that on this one, I would end up destroying the integrity of it, so I'll Command Z that. And in both cases, well, I should just say that right now I have the bounding box on, which makes them look very, very similar. If I turn the bounding box off, which most of the time I work with it on, but every now and then there's a reason where you wouldn't want it off. But you just go to the View menu and you go Hide Bounding Box. And so now it's not obvious how you would resize this because the bounding box is gone. This is a good thing to know in case it ever disappears on you, because I think there's a shortcut for it that's somewhat common. But now they look very different from each other. But I'll turn the bounding box back on by going to View and Show Bounding Box. Also, if you take instead of the selection tool and you use the direct selection tool, that kind of gives you a little more of the view like with the bounding box off, and it makes it a little bit easier to tell that this is point text and that this is an area text, because even with the bounding box turned off, your area still shows. Another interesting thing about area text is that if you select it, you can go up to Type, you can go to Area Type Options, and you can actually inside of this area start to do some interesting things. Like for example, if I have Preview selected here and I up the number of columns, I changed it to 2-column work now. It gives me the exact width and height, and we'll talk more about these options in an upcoming video. Another thing about area text is the area doesn't have to be a rectangle. It normally is, and you just make that area again by taking the Type tool and clicking and dragging. And let's make our text quite a bit smaller here before we do that again. So come over here and we'll set our text size to something. Oh, let me make sure this box isn't selected because it would change the size over here. Okay, so I'm going to click away from everything just by grabbing the selection tool and just clicking. Then we'll grab the text tool and we'll change our size down to something smaller here. So again, just click out your rectangle, it fills it. But what if you want text inside of another shape? It can be any shape that you draw from scratch, or it can be a predefined shape, like for example an ellipse. And right now my ellipse is set that it will draw with a black fill and no black fill, no stroke, but it really doesn't matter because as soon as the text goes in it, it goes away. So as of right now, it's just a shape. If I make sure that shape is indeed selected, so deselected, selected, and I grab the same text tool that we've been using, and I have my smart guides on, which I'll talk more about in a second here, and I go to the edge, I don't have mine on, so let's talk about them right now. So to turn your smart guides on, if they're off, you go to View, Smart Guides, And then when you get right to the edge of this, you'll see the word path come up from the Smart Guide. And as soon as you click on that, it's going to change this into an area and fill it with type. In the next video, we'll get more into the character panel